Okay, so for the first part of this lesson plan, you could tell that the scaffolding was going in a good order because they've done this kind of activity once before. And you weren't so much leading as you were watching what they remembered. You waited to give them any instruction or guidance until they asked you for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you were keeping a good distance. You were there if they needed you. And it seemed like they were remembering pretty well about how to do the navigation. They've got a good awareness of the angles. I think it's from all of the practice they've been doing lately.
Mm-hmm.
But the new elements, like the multiple turns in a row because of the amount of degrees, we asked them to turn left or right.
Mm-hmm.
That was what was tricky for them. One thing I did notice, it's a small thing, but they were speaking Japanese quite a bit. I think they can start to keep things in English a little bit more, asking those questions to each other. In free time, they tend to switch to Japanese, which is okay, but learning to negotiate meaning as a group in group work, they need to really focus on developing those English skills. Otherwise, I thought that it was a really successful activity to review and to show that they're gaining more independence with the concepts. How did you feel like it? Everyone?
I feel that at the start they were wondering why the numbers get bigger and bigger, and they were wondering how to turn, and then they need to double check, like they just say, are you sure you're asking us to go like 810 degrees? And I say, yes, just follow the instructions, be confident. And you just carry out the rounds. And some of them, they help one another actually. There's a collaboration when I was looking at them, and then they were like, oh, if one round is 360, what's 3 rounds? And then someone was like doing the calculations. It's 3 rounds, that would be 540. And then so what's the leftover degree? How much must I turn? So they were like asking one another. So quite interesting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching them work it out between each other. There's one more thing I was gonna say. Can't remember what it was. It'll come to me. I might put it in another part. Okay, so for the next part of the lesson, we got into checking the homework, and between absences and then already the different language modifications that we're making sure are there for the EAL students, they do end up being in quite different spots sometimes. So I could tell that while you were working with one student, the others were really focused on what they were doing, but also that students are starting to initiate more with you. When this group was in grade 5 last year, I sensed a little bit of general insecurity about asking questions and being proactive, but I can tell that you're making yourself very accessible, you're keeping them accountable to make sure they understand every step, so they know they need to ask, because they will be showing their understanding to you at some point. And making sure that you had all of the supplies accessible and ready for them to go. Everything was at the ready. Everything you needed was at the table.
I think there's this point when I was supporting Meta. He just don't stay with a question long enough to think of how to solve the question, and he quickly go for the easiest way, which is to ask. And sometimes I would just give him a hint, like, okay, so what do you know about this shape, the properties and stuff? Just give him some hints and lead him to that to the working that he's supposed to have. So I think that's quite useful in that sense for him.
You said that he's quick to ask at home if he has a question. Were you saying that earlier about the homework?
Yeah, the
That
homework
he had
as
asked
well.
his mom
Yeah.
at home, yeah. Yeah, good. I hope, yeah, they keep building that endurance.
Okay.
Okay, looking at review of the properties for the 3 and 4-sided figures. One thing as you were going through all the properties, everybody is turned towards you. It starts out and they're all engaged. And you did mix up, you didn't just do call and response and anybody who's ready just jumps in there with the answer. You went back and forth from that and talking to each student individually. It's nice to have such a small group to be able to do that. And one thing I did notice about where they're seated, it is okay for them to switch around. And the two, well, Reno this time was really, she's with it and she's really tracking. It's okay to put students who may not be with you every step of the way, put them a little bit more in the hot seat positions, like where they're in an arm's reach.
Yes, I'll do that.
And sometimes I feel like I get a little bit too explicit with reminders per student, and I say their name or just draw attention to them, but it's as easy as standing right next to them. Like keep the questions flowing. You were keeping the review going really well. Don't miss a beat. Just keep with what you're saying, but just go stand right next to him, or with the tip of your marker, just like let it rest on his shoulder. Just a quick signal to him that's nonverbal. It brings him back, but it doesn't shift everybody's attention to him. So something quick and by the side, just to keep them engaged. And there may be something we can do, dry erase boards or something. You had a lot of questions as review, so you don't want to stop and wait for every question, but here and there, sprinkling some questions where, okay, now everybody draw this 4-sided figure. I'm just telling you the name and you draw that figure on your dry erase board and then everybody shows. So there's some balance. You ask a few questions and then maybe they give you one, they show their understanding of one of them on the dry erase boards. Then everybody's kind of accountable for showing their own understanding, and it's a bit of a rhythm. And then you're having them step up to help take responsibility for the review themselves. You had you come up to the board to show at the board instead of you doing it, and that's shifting some of the responsibility and leadership to them. And despite the distractions, I think we're really seeing some added engagement where in a particular student specifically who was kind of just having some anxiety with the topic, so we can really see how much she's grown, which is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, you can tell that you've really given some specific attention to her and made sure that she feels comfortable that her questions are answered.
That's great.
I think that's a connection already to the valuing students element. It's really clear that teachers are doing a good job of that in student progress and comfort level and confidence.
Yay!
Yay!
Okay.
Okay. So as you are going through the different properties of regular polygons, I think in this lesson, more than the awareness of the mathematical concepts, it was really language A lot of language connections that they were making. So important because every student is in some form on the on a spectrum in EAL. And the student who's joined us this year particularly is getting a lot of this vocabulary for the very first time. It was really good that you addressed some of the spelling, and you could see them making language connections, like the prefix for octagon, octopus.
Yes.
Playing a little bit, but that's good. And let's see. It's good to see, again, just appreciating this student that has been kind of soft-spoken in math before has really become more outspoken. She's really good, I think, with reviewing her notes, and she's really accountable for the information.
Yeah, yes.
So I think that might give us a little bit of a clue for future differentiation. For an activity where there might not necessarily be a note sheet or something, maybe we can provide one, because it may just need to be something that she takes with her where the information's visual. Yeah. And if we make the resource, we may as well share it with all the students too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see that they're all jumping in and participating more, to the point that you may need a couple of tricks in your toolbox for when they kind of start to take over.
I need some tricks.
Yeah. Well, the challenging thing, it's nice to have such a small group because it is like a tutoring group a little bit, but it is still a full lesson. So they need to maybe some kind of trick where they reset and not just snapping to get their attention like we do in grade 5, 6. Like with the combined whole group, but some kind of phrase or something, maybe they can help you decide what it should be. In fact, if you reflect on how engaged everybody was at different, or the next time this happens in a class, you can just stop and reflect right there. What's a way that we can reset when we need to have not quite everyone talking at the same time?
Okay.
But instead of, if you can hear my voice snap once, something that just gets them settled back at the table.
I think it's a good idea. Yeah, I think I should ask them, see how they would like it to be. Yeah. I'll do that the next lesson. Yeah, when I get to do.
At this point, yeah, because we have a weekend in between, and I think they deal better with immediate feedback. So when you're
So
in
fresh.
when the situation comes up again. And yeah, anytime you can, give just a little bit of advance notice to the student who's joined us most recently, so she can be forming her response with a little bit of notice. And then the student that we're doing some differentiation for, who's had some confidence issues with math in the past. Okay, I'm going to ask you about the sum of the interior angles, and then you be ready because I'm going to ask you next to do this task. Yeah, so good though to see that you're fostering a space where they feel really safe to jump in there and say what they are thinking. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job.
Well, you gave me really good ideas. I will do that.
I'm having trouble thinking of things that conceptually, because you're doing such a good job of making the concepts really visual for them. I feel like the things that I see that I can give some feedback about growth areas wise, it's just like the little things, like classroom management things, but the math side of things is really strong. They're getting visuals they can always be looking at, and really individualized attention when they're working on homework and checking.
It's good. Yay.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.